Warmer than average and drier than average for most parts of New Zealand for the rest of November. Kia ora, I'm Philip Duncan. Thanks very much for joining us. We are tracking a bit of a change in our weather pattern. If you've been over on the west coast, you've had a lot of rain. We're now starting to see some big breaks in that rain with plenty of sunny, drier days as well. We're also seeing a lift in temperatures. Some parts of the South Island have had a few cool days. In fact, some in the north have as well. So we've got warmer than average weather on the way pretty much for the rest of the month. So let's try and figure out what's going on. High pressure, pretty much the dominant feature of this weather map. We've put on the wind maps today, the temperatures. You can see how much warmer it is in Australia and how cooler it is through the Southern Alps. With this high now in place and moving a little bit further northwards, we're going to get more of this warm airflow coming in towards New Zealand. Now, with a lot of high pressure coming through, the winds are actually going to be changing direction quite a lot over the next week. You're going to have northerlies and southerlies, westerlies and easterlies. But the main airflow coming to New Zealand is coming from the subtropics and from out of Australia for the most part. A little bit does come from the Southern Ocean, but a lot of it is coming from that area. So almost regardless of your localized wind direction, we've got warmer airflows and drier airflows coming our way. So this is how we end the working week. Friday, the high is parked just to the west of Auckland and Northland. It is encouraging warm subtropical nor'westers out of Australia and also the Coral Sea. Those winds pick up around the South Island and that lifts your temperatures even further. So warm and dry for many places, just a few light showers around Fiordland, maybe around Westland, and the North Island's looking mostly dry and warming up. Even though it's a sou'wester, when you track the origins, it's really coming out of the subtropics. So that's the end of the working week. As we go into the weekend, the high is pretty much in control. Now there's a little bit of rain on the west coast. That moves a little bit further northwards, but once you get to about Hokitika, Greymouth and Westport, things are drying out. And in fact, over the next 7 days, up around Westport, you lean a little bit drier than average, whereas around about Hokitika southwards, you're still in that wetter than average, but it's not as wet as it has been. So a little bit of wet weather on Saturday, otherwise dry around the country and warmer than average. Warmer than average on Sunday. In fact, some places 10 degrees above normal. We've got a little bit of rain on the west coast moving northwards. And in fact, the South Island might just have a little bit of a cooler change because your winds have gone away from being that northwest flow to a bit more of a westerly flow coming out from around Tasmania. It's still coming out of the Australian desert, but it's further away, so it cools down a bit more. So a little bit of wet weather moves up to the main centres of the west coast, but it's dry pretty much everywhere else. There might be an isolated shower or two around coastal Otago and Southland as well as we go through the day. And then we head into Monday and high pressure still in the same place. And now we're getting a little bit more of that northwest subtropical breeze returning. But you know what I said before about don't really focus too much on the wind direction, because look at this on Monday. You've got easterlies, southeasterlies, southerlies, southwesters, northeasterlies. I mean, it's coming from all directions, and that's mostly light winds as well. Now, as we go through next week, not a great deal of change. I mean, these weather maps are looking quite similar. So Tuesday, more nor'westers or subtropical winds, mostly dry around New Zealand. There might be an isolated shower. I mean, the rainfall totals for the upper North Island for the rest of the month are between 0 and 1 millimetre. Now, obviously, if you get a downpour, you might get 10 or 15 millimetres. But for the most part, there is not much rain coming. And that's why we are saying drier than average and warmer than average as well. And our final map for Wednesday of next week doesn't really show a great deal of change. High pressure in charge. This is a little bit of low pressure in the middle here, but it's not going to do much. So this is pretty much dominating our forecast, and we've still got the westerly quarter winds blowing through. The west coast has a couple of showers. It's not that wet, but it's still a little bit wet. So I think overall, many of you are going to like the forecast, but if you do need rain in the north of the country, not a good forecast for you because it is looking drier and hotter for the rest of the month. And I would imagine as we go into the start of December, we're going to see a little more of this pattern, keeping the west coast and Southland just a degree or two cooler and maybe a little bit wetter than normal. But we'll talk about that next week when we do our first climate update, our first seasonal forecast for summer and also the month of December. That's all from me for now, though. We'll see you again on Friday.